So today I am going to finally unbox this Derwent Line and Wash set. It's a hybrid set with a mix of their intense graphite and pastel paints, and according to them, it has been put together specifically for urban sketching. These sets always come with this kind of color chart, but it's pretty useless because they're never very accurate. I usually never use the water brush. I'll probably save it for putting ink into later. And the same thing with the sponge. I just don't use it. And now to get the fine liners out of the packaging. I was going to rip them out, but then I remembered that I wanted to save the package. And the only scissor nearby was this rusty tailoring scissors. So after much struggle, they are free. I have never seen fine liners with this design. There's a little clear bit in the cap to see through to the tip for some reason. And through the barrel, you can see the nib or the feet sticking out before it goes into the reservoir. I don't know what's that all about. So now I'm going to swatch everything. Usually I would just do this on a pencil scribbled page, but for the sake of this video, I am going to do it on a brand new page. The first color is Sun Yellow, an intense one. I decided not to pre-wet the paints this time. The next color is Mango, also an intense one. I don't know why I swatched them so long. And then we have Poppy Red, also an intense color. This and Mango are included in the normal Derwent Intense paint pan set, and most of the others too, actually. Next color is Autumn Brown. This is a graphite paint. All of the graphite pans included here will also be in the graphite paint pan set. And then Port, a graphite paint. I do have the graphite set, but they're one of my favorites, so I'm not upset about having duplicates at all. Then we have Bright Blue and Intense, and also included in the normal set. Next, Payne's Gray. Finally, a color that isn't in the other sets. And then the next color is Ocean Blue. This actually swatched out quite a bit lighter than it actually is. I'm not sure why, but I did try again later, and it is the same as the other Ocean Blue that I already have. So it's just this swatch in particular that's weird. But anyway, next is Artichoke, a pastel color. And I do not have their pastel set, nor am I interested in it, so I'm glad I have this color to try out. But yeah, both of the pastels included here are in the pastel set. Next, Meadow, a graphite. Then Natural Brown and Intense. And Storm Gray, a pastel. It's very light, so I do try an opacity test, and you'll see it when I start scribbling, but it's not very opaque at all. As for the studies, At first, I thought I would try the artist who was featured on the packaging, who is Jedediah Dor, but as soon as I looked up their artwork, I realized that it is a very specific and very stylized style. So if I just randomly attempted it, then it would just be a complete mess. So I decided to do Matthews Aranowitz instead, who I have followed on YouTube for so long. This is from one of his illustrations, but it's so scribbly and it looks nothing like it. I was wondering if I could mix a color that would be darker than the Payne's Gray. So I tried mixing it with natural brown, but it doesn't work. So I guess the Payne's Gray is the darkest you can go with this palette. Increasing the amount of natural brown makes a nice neutral looking color though. I also tried the usual way of making a gray or black with the poppy red and the bright blue. But as you can see, that makes more of a violet sort of color instead. So the red is pinker than it looks, which is good. So this next study is of a shopfront illustration by Matthews Urbanowitz. And I decided to do a full 2-page spread for this one. And I'm sorry about the horizontal view, but I could not figure out a better way to film it at the moment. But after I block out the main shapes, I just detail the sketch off camera. And that took a full day, I think. It really was more work than I expected, and I had expected a lot of work. But now inking. The original piece has very organic line work, so I didn't use a ruler for the straight lines. And also, since I'm using a thicker pen, it's not going to be as delicate, but that doesn't bother me. I'm extremely happy with how these fine liners performed though. They are super juicy, but they also dry fast. Urbanowitz style for the recent storefronts doesn't have any hatching and instead has a lot of small details that are outlined, so I did not have to get a different fine liner because I think this point 0.3 would have been too big for that for the most part. Since the signboard was confusing the hell out of me, I tried drawing it in layers, as in what's topmost and then what's underneath that and so on. And it was so much more manageable that way. And you can see how slow the process really was before I sped it up 10x or 1000%. But soon it was time to do the part that scared me the most, which was the railing. And yeah, even in the pencils, it's not even sized right all the way, but I didn't want to redo it, so I just left it wonky. And somehow I messed up the heights of the bars too, even though that was clearly marked out. But anyway, for the last part, I had to put the sketchbook flat on the table. And on top of that, I also have to put it way out on the table because the tripod that I use can't reach up to the end of the table where you would naturally draw on. So I really need to figure out a different setup for these things because 99% of why lining this was so irritating was because of how I had to position my hand and how uncomfortable it was. So, yeah, that's why the ground floor level of this shopfront is so messy. I was done. And this is coming from someone who loves doing line work with pens. So now, moving on, I decided to fill in the entire page with a light wash. I used bright blue for the top and autumn brown for the bottom. It dried down super light. In fact, everything has a very big drying shift, except maybe the sun yellow. The main problem with this set and the artwork that I was studying was that Abranovit's colors are bright and clear, which would be very difficult, if not impossible, with this particular set. So I should have thought it out a bit more for sure, but of course I didn't. I decided to make a pastel pink by mixing the poppy red with the storm gray. And it worked fair enough, but it definitely did not help in the clear colors look. My thinking was that even diluted down, it would not give me that pinky color, but I did try later and it is possible. If heavily diluted and with a tiny bit of blue, it is definitely very fickle to figure out though, because of the massive drying shifts mostly. But anyway, I finally realized that I was doing this in the wrong order and started working on the background of the signboard, which is what I should have done first of all. And I used more of that gray and red mix. I think I mixed this purpley color with the gray too. And the blue for the building was also mixed with the gray. But in this case, the color in the original artwork is actually impossible to get with this set. Another thing I noticed was the texture that shows up in these paints. And I don't mean the granulation, which the bright blue has some of. There's a sandy kind of texture apart from that, which reminds me of when the pigment separates when you paint. It shows up in all the paints, except a lot less in the yellows and the pastels. But it seems to specifically be on this paper because I swatched them on mixed media paper and it does not show it. So maybe it's because this paper is very smooth or something. In any case, I'm almost certain it's just this kind of paper because I have used the main set and the graphite set on rougher or softer sketchbook papers and watercolor papers, and they have not had this texture. I had to go over the signboard again because it just did not look right. But now it's definitely too dark in places. And I was painting the shadow for the extra signboard on the left, and I wish I had kept most of this piece simple like that. The crisp, clean shadow just looks so satisfying. So, as I wrap up this piece, I'm just going to gather my final thoughts on this whole experience. At first, I wanted to do not just one study, I was thinking to do three or four. And the other artist would have been Jörg Esselborn, who would actually have been a better fit for this set, I think. And I decided to do this subject matter just because that's what this set is supposedly put together for. And while I have done urban sketching before, it's very rarely and not quite like this. So I kind of gave myself a rough start by trying to use something I haven't tried before and with a subject matter I'm not familiar with. If I were to do this again, I'd plan out the painting process a bit more because I think that's mostly the part that didn't work out. But since almost a month has passed since I did this piece, I can look at it without being annoyed. And one study just isn't enough to try to figure something out, so I do need to do more. But as for my thoughts on the set itself, it does have a color palette that I really like. But since the graphite or pastels outnumber the ink tints, I feel like it ends up with a bit chalky of a look in places where you have to mix colors. I have used them more since this study, but it still has been on this sketchbook. So a change in paper might fix that. I can't say. Overall, though, I'm glad I have this set, and I really like the line markers, but I am trying to stop using fine liners because they aren't refillable. And I think it's quite obvious that this set is not a good beginner set or anything. I wouldn't even say it's a good urban sketching beginner set, just because it has rather specific colors. So far, I have found myself using it most to add a bit of color to my sketches when I don't want to think about color palette. Like when I grab a typical set and I'm not thinking, it'll end up with primary looking colors usually. But with this one, there's a more unique look, even if I'm not trying. Well, anyway, I hope this video was useful or entertaining. Thanks for watching.